Have you ever stopped and looked around at our world? We've got all this amazing technology, all this convenience, and yet for so many of us, there's this constant, low-level anxiety. You hit the career goals, you get the stuff you're supposed to want, but that deep feeling of, okay, I'm at peace, it's just not there. Well, what if the secret to a truly satisfying life isn't some new hack, but a blueprint from over 2,000 years ago? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to tackle this weird thing called the modern happiness paradox. Then, we'll get into Aristotle's big idea, the art of flourishing. We're going to break down his three essential pillars. That's virtue, wisdom, and community. And then, we'll wrap it all up by figuring out how you can actually use this ancient blueprint in your life starting today.
So let's start with a problem I think we all feel. We live in a world that tells us to chase achievement. Get the grade, get the job, get the promotion. But for some reason, that feeling of peace doesn't seem to follow. It's like we're running on a treadmill, thinking the finish line is just ahead, but it keeps moving. So what is going on here?
Yeah, this question is really at the core of it all. It's what we could call the happiness paradox. And the issue isn't that we're not trying hard enough. The issue is that we've been aiming at the wrong target. Modern life has basically sold us on a type of happiness that Aristotle would have called a trap. We're playing the wrong game entirely.
And this is where it gets really clear. On one side, you've got Hedonia. Think of this as the happiness of passive pleasure. Short-term thrills, comfort, ease. It's that sugar rush you get from a new purchase or a social media like. It feels good for a minute, but it's fleeting and it always leaves you needing another hit. On the other side is Aristotle's big idea, Eudaimonia. This isn't an emotion you chase, it's a state of being you build. It's about actively flourishing, finding that long-term fulfillment that comes from becoming who you're meant to be.
So if chasing those short-term thrills, Hedonia, is the trap, how do we get out? Well, this is where we really get into Aristotle's solution. His whole point was that we need to stop thinking of happiness as a fleeting feeling we can catch and start thinking of it as a life of genuine flourishing that we can build. It's a total mindset shift.
And that's Eudaimonia. It's that deep, solid, unshakable satisfaction that comes from truly living up to your potential. It's the feeling you get from a life well lived. And the key thing here, this is not a passive thing. You don't just find it one day. It's an active process. It's demanding for sure, but it's way more rewarding in the long run. To get there, Aristotle gave us a framework built on three main pillars. Pillar number one is the foundation for everything else. It's virtue. Now, the Greek word here is arete, and virtue doesn't quite capture it. A better translation is actually excellence. So this is all about building an excellent character, about being excellent at the art of being human. Aristotle's logic here is actually beautiful and simple. He looked around and said, everything has a function, right? The function of a knife is to cut, so a good knife is a sharp one. Then he asked, okay, so what's the unique function of a human being? What makes us different? His answer? Our ability to reason. So it follows that a good, flourishing human life, Eudaimonia, is one where we use our reason with excellence. Simple as that.
But, use reason with excellence is a bit abstract. How do we actually do that in our messy, everyday lives? Well, for this, Aristotle gives us an incredibly practical tool, the golden mean. He said that virtue isn't about being an extremist. It's always a balance, a sweet spot right in the middle of two vices. One where you have too little of something, and one where you have way too much.
Let's make this super concrete. Think about courage. On one extreme, the deficiency, you've got cowardice. That's when you have too much fear and you back down from every challenge. On the other extreme, the excess, you've got recklessness, not having enough fear and just blindly charging into danger. The virtue, courage, is that perfect midpoint. It's having the wisdom to feel the fear but act correctly anyway. Same thing with generosity. It's the sweet spot between being a total cheapskate and just throwing your money away. It's a constant balancing act.
Okay, so having a virtuous character is our foundation. But just knowing what courage is on paper doesn't really help you when you're facing a tough, real-world decision. That's where the second pillar comes in. We need the wisdom to actually apply those virtues. Aristotle called this Phronesis, which translates to practical wisdom. Now, this is not about being book smart or having a crazy high IQ. It's about applied knowledge. It's about real-world street smarts for life. Think of it like a veteran leader's intuition or an expert's gut feeling. It's that ability to read a complex situation, understand the people involved, and make the right call for the right reason at just the right moment. Phronesis is what turns good intentions into good actions.
And you can see this play out all the time in our careers, right? Someone without Phronesis might jump at a shady, high-paying job for that short-term cash. That's a hedonistic choice. But someone with practical wisdom plays the long game. They prioritize meaningful work, they think about the long-term consequences of their choices, and they avoid the shiny objects that lead to regret down the road.
The great news is that Phronesis isn't some magical gift. It's a skill you can build through practice. It really boils down to a 4-step process. First, you look at the situation clearly, without your biases getting in the way. Second, you think about the ripple effects, the long-term consequences. Third, you take a moment to deliberate and make sure your choice lines up with your values, with that golden mean. And finally, you act. This is basically your internal GPS for life's tough decisions.
But here's the twist. Even if you became the most virtuous person with flawless practical wisdom, Aristotle says you still couldn't reach true eudaimonia. Why? Because you can't flourish in a vacuum. And that brings us to his third and final pillar, the one our modern world often forgets: purpose through community. Aristotle famously said, "We are zoon politikon," which means we are social or political animals by our very nature. We're hardwired for connection. He believed that a fully human life has to be lived with and for other people. A flourishing life isn't about climbing a mountain by yourself, it's about being a valued member of your community.
And this is where another huge modern paradox smacks us in the face. We live in this hyper-connected world with thousands of online friends, but rates of loneliness are through the roof. This kind of isolation is a massive roadblock to eudaimonia. It explains why some of the wealthiest, most successful people in the world can still feel deeply empty. They're missing this fundamental human need for real connection and a shared sense of purpose.
And it's not just about having friends to hang out with, it's about contribution. Aristotle believed true fulfillment comes when your purpose becomes bigger than just yourself. When you use your skills and your character to add real value to your family, your team, your society, that's when your life goes from just being good to truly flourishing.
So, let's put it all together. We have the 3 pillars: a virtuous character as our foundation, the practical wisdom to navigate life, and a meaningful community to belong to. Now for the million-dollar question. How on earth do we apply this ancient blueprint to our busy, modern 21st century lives?
Well, it can start with a few simple shifts. We can practice mindful consumption, not just asking, does this feel good now, but does this align with the person I want to be? We can start seeing our work not just as a way to get a paycheck, but as a daily gym for practicing virtue and wisdom. We can make a real effort to cultivate those deep, authentic, real-world relationships. And maybe most importantly, we can remember that eudaimonia isn't a destination, it's a lifelong journey of learning and growing.
Ultimately, what this all comes down to is a radical redefinition of success. It means we have to stop measuring our lives by what we own or by our job titles. We have to start measuring our lives by the quality of our character, by our wisdom, by our contribution, by the degree to which we are truly flourishing as human beings.
So, I'll leave you with a question from this ancient blueprint to think about in your modern life. As you look for your own balance, your own golden mean, what's the one virtue you feel you need to focus on developing right now? Is it courage, patience, generosity? What's the next step on your own journey to a flourishing life?